Hi students, today I am going to discuss about genetics and evolution. It is an important unit where we can score 18% of the NEET marks in biology. Okay, the weightage is given to this topic is 18%. Okay, this unit consists of four topics. One is a principle of inheritance. Another lesson is molecular basis of inheritance, and the third one is evolutions. The last one is an population and organism. So this is the unit where we can get 80% weightage marks to that particular topics. Okay, it is, though it is very difficult to learn, because this genetics is the concept is brought newly in the higher secondary levels. Previously it was in the undergraduate studies. Now it is familiar, most of the students are familiar and having the advanced knowledge. Now they are able to learn what is genetics in their higher secondary levels. So genetics, when we think about genetics, surely we should remember our family. Why I am saying, why we should remember our family? Look at our family members. Are they alike? Yes, 100%. Our grandfather, grandmother, mother and father, and our brothers and sisters, we are all alike, resembles each other. Am I right? How this is possible? When you go out and do some activity, or when your neighbors look at you, they will say you all look like your father, or she is look like her mother, she is look like her grandmother, her attitude is like her grandmother, or her attitude is like her mother, is like his father. So all these things the people used to say. Why they are saying like that? How these characters are transformed, are transferred from the parents to offspring, from one generation to another generation. All these things are deals about the particular point, that is in genetic material. Today we know the genetic material is responsible for the transmission of the characters from the parents to offspring, from one generation to another generation. But in olden time, in 17th to 18th century, the scientists could not understand what exactly the reason which is carrying the information from parents to offspring. Okay, until the idea is given by Gregor Johann Mendel. He is the person who has conducted experiments in the Pisum sativum and proved that the factors are responsible for transmission of the characters from one generation to another generation, from the parent to offspring. Okay. However, when we see our family members are alike, but there is minor differences in their characteristics. Okay, these differences or changes in their characteristics is nothing but a variation. So variation bring the changes in the characteristics. 99% we resemble like our father, our mother, our grandparents, but 1% that is an unique. So that uniqueness is created by this variation process. Okay, that only we are going to study. Okay, what is genetics? Genetics என்ன? We know that genetics, இது ஒரு பெரிய வித்தியாசமான ஒரு கான்செப்ட், அவ்வளோ ஹார்டாக இருக்கும். இட் இஸ் நாட் லைக் தட். ஜெனட்டிக்ஸ் இஸ் a hot topic, hot research topic in science and technology. So many research are carried out in this field. So let's have the definition of genetics. Genetics is the branch of biological science which deals with heredity and variation. Heredity is nothing but inheritance. பரம்பரையாக வர்றது ஒரு கேரக்டர்ஸ், ஃபோர் ஃபாதர்ஸ்லேருந்து grandfathers and fathers, then comes to their offspring, children, all these things. So inheritance, possess, the gene possess these characters that carried out from one generation to another generation. So genetics is a branch of biological science which deals with heredity and variation. Who gave this word term genetics? Genetic into the word is W. Bateson in 1905. Is the person who has given the term genetics. In State Board book, that year is written 1906, but in the NCERT book it is written 1905. So W. Bateson has given the term genetics. Okay. So I told you the genetics is nothing but that the study of heredity and variations. So what is heredity? The transmission of characters from one generation to another generation. Am I right? So based on this concept, there are 4 sub-disciplines of genetics courses. One is in classical genetics. Classical genetics. Okay. Second one is in molecular genetics. Molecular genetics. The third one is population genetics. Population genetics. The fourth sub-discipline course, that is quantitative genetics. So these are the 4 sub-discipline courses of genetics. One is the classical genetics, another one is the molecular genetics, population genetics, quantitative genetics. Classical genetics is nothing but a transmission of inheritance, transmission of the character, transmission genetics. So molecular genetics study the structure and function of the gene at molecular level. Population genetics study a particular types of genes in the populations. Okay. Then quantitative genetics is nothing but continuous variations. Okay, where the variations are occurs due to the environmental changes and genetic factors. All these things. Okay, these are the 4 sub-discipline courses of genetics. Okay, number 1 is in classical genetics, number 2 is a molecular genetics, number 3 is a population genetics and quantitative genetics. As I told, that transmission of the characters, which will do the transmission of the character from the parents to offspring. Okay, we say it is an DNA, the genetic material. This genetic material, who is carrying this DNA? Chromosome. The chromosome is considered the vehicle of transmissions of character. Vehicle of transmission of character, because it contains the DNA, genetic material, and carry. Okay, this chromosome transmit all the genetic materials from one generation to another generation. Thereby, the chromosome is called as the vehicle of transmission of DNA, genetic material. Okay, this DNA, a small portion of the DNA is known as gene segment. Okay, a segment of DNA is known as gene, which code for the protein. Which code for protein? Which code for the protein? Which code for the characters? Okay, protein characters. Trait. Character or trait. There will be, see, one gene, one trait. One gene, one trait. So one gene, one character. Okay. So only one gene controls the characters, of the organism. So this is, we call it an monogenic inheritance. This is the monogenic inheritance. Okay. So polygene, certain cases, one character is controlled by many genes. One character is controlled by many genes. This is, we call it an polygenic. polygenic inheritance. Do you understand? If one trait or one character is controlled by one gene, that's known as a monogenic inheritance. If one gene, many genes control one trait, it's a polygenic inheritance. Do you understand? Okay, fine. So now you are very clear. The gene is responsible to carry the genetic information in the form of the protein. Okay, the form of proteins. Okay, so this gene is involved. It is having the alternative form. So it is an inherited factor that involves in the transmission of the character of organism. So it is an inherited factor. Okay, which code for the character of an organism. The alternative form of gene, we call it an allele. Alternative form of gene, we call it an allele. Okay. Consider here. Okay. This is an allele T. So this is also T. Look at this. So in this cases, alleles, a pair of allele is similar. Here also it's similar. Am I right? So the gene, alternative form of gene is an allele. So one allele is dominant over the another allele. One allele is dominant over the another allele. Allele of one factor is dominant over or expressed phenotypically. So that is, we call it an dominant allele. Dominant allele. Allele always in a pair. Okay, allele always in a pair. So look at this. It's always in a pair. Okay. So certain alleles, the allele of factors, okay, are not able to express itself. So thereby it is considered an recessive allele. Okay. So thereby the alleles, if that allelic pair are same, then it is an homozygous condition. If it is different, and that is, we call it an heterozygous condition. Here these allelic, a pair of allelic forms are similar, so thereby it is an homozygous condition. And here also you look at this, this alleles of the particular gene is homozygous, same. So thereby it is a homozygous condition. So certain cases, this is, we call it the alleles of a particular characters, okay, is in different form. One is in dominant, another one is in recessive. So this is, we call it an heterozygous form. Hetero, different. Homo means same, hetero means different. Pair of alleles are same, that's, we call it an homozygous alleles, and if it is different, then heterozygous alleles. Do you understand what I am saying? Homozygous and heterozygous. Clear? So in case of homozygous, this is the allele, okay, factors, allele, a pair of alleles are same, so thereby it is homozygous, and this trait is an tallness. The characters of this gene represent tallness. Okay. So in case of heterozygous, contrasting alleles. See, look at this. This is a contrasting alleles. So out of this, a pair of alleles, so only one allele more expressive over the other alleles. So this is more expressive over the other allele phenotypically. Okay, so phenotypically expressions given by this allele, so thereby tall. Okay, and this is known as dominant allele, and this one, since it is not able to express itself because of the dominant allele, so thereby this is known as recessive allele. Do you understand what I am saying? So heterozygous is nothing but hybrid. Heterozygous is nothing but hybrids having different form of alleles. Okay, so that there are different form of alleles and the same form of alleles in the homozygous. Do you understand? Okay, so I have introduced the term one gene. What is gene? Is the inherited factor foreign characters of an organism. So genes alternative form is alleles. Okay, alleles always in a pair. If that alleles are two genes are similar, then it is known as an homozygous condition. If the two genes of a characters is not similar, then it is an heterozygous conditions. Do you understand? Clear? Let's move on to the variation. Okay, let's move on to the variations. What is variation? Variation என்ன சொல்லும்? ஒரே வீட்டில் வந்து அண்ணன் தம்பி இருந்தாலும் அவங்க ரெண்டு பேரும் சேம் ரிசம்பிளாக இருந்தாலும் அவங்களுக்குள்ள ஒரு மைன்யூட் டிஃப்ரென்ஸ் இருக்கும். அவங்களுடைய கேரக்டர், மேபி ஆட்டிடியூட்ஸ் ஆர் ஃபிசிக்கல் அப்பியரன்ஸ். ஸோ வாட் எவர் இட் இஸ், தேர் வில் பி மைன்யூட் டிஃப்ரென்சஸ் இன் தேர் கேரக்டரிஸ்டிக்ஸ் of an individual of particular species. So that's we call it an variation. These variations are two types. One is a discontinuous variation. Another one is a continuous variation. So let's see about the discontinuous variation. So in this type of variation, it's having the limited form of variations. So it is having the limited form of variation. Why it is having the limited form of variation? Within the population. Within the population. Examples you can say that is style length. Style length of primula. Primula. Style length of primula as well as the height. Height of plant. Okay, this is the examples for the discontinuous variation. The variations are limited within the population. Example, style length of primula, height of plants. So these things will not give any intermediate products. Okay, in discontinuous variation we won't find any intermediate products. Okay, so either it will be taller or it will be shorter. That's all. We won't find the medium level. Clear? So because the phenotype are not overlapping with each others. Phenotypes are not overlapping with each others. The phenotype, expression of the phenotype is not affected by the genetic factor, by the environmental factor and genetic factors. So that's why it is a discontinuous variation occurs within a particular populations of the species. Okay, so in case of continuous variation, so the variation often occurs. Okay, and it is affected or controlled by the variation. Continuous variation is controlled by the genetic factor as well as the environmental factor. So the continuous variation control பண்றது genetic factor environmental factor. Environmental ஏதாவது changes ஆயிடுச்சுனா இல்ல genetic mutation நடந்துச்சுனா automatically the variation will take place in the gene and leading to the different new traits or new characters. That is continuous variations. In this we will find out the intermediate product. Example, if we see the height of the human beings, the height of the human being, tall and short. Okay, we won't find only tall and short, but we will find the medium height of the human beings also. So this is intermediate conditions in the continuous variations, and it is affected by genetic factor as well as the environmental factors. Okay, so that's good. I hope so you understand the difference between the discontinuous variation and continuous variations. So what is the technical term is given for the discontinuous variation? Qualitative inheritance. This we call it a qualitative inheritance. Okay, this is quantitative inheritance. Quantitative inheritance. Do you understand? Let's move on to the theories, which is explaining about how these offsprings are formed or how the characters are transmitted from the parents to the offspring. So there are three levels. One is in pre-Mendelian and Mendelian and post. Okay, three stages: pre-Mendelian theory, post-Mendelian theory. So, what is the pre-Mendelian theory? Who is Mendel? So, Gregor Johann Mendel is known as the father of genetics. Why? Because he conducted the experiments in the Bateson pea plants, garden pea plants, and he has published his book, okay, where he mentioned the factors are responsible for the transmission of the character from the parents to offspring. He conducted many allelic forms, 3 or 4 allelic forms of the traits are experimented, and he has given everything is accurate. In the beginning it was not accepted because at the time there was a lot of controversy. So most of them used to follow the Aristotle's statements and so many philosopher statements. So they did not agree with him. But later on, the three scientists, eminent scientists, who has taken this Mendelian law and rediscovered this, it is the key point. What he told, the factor, is finally concluded as a genetic material, that is we call it today as DNA. Am I right? So pre-Mendelian theory. What are the pre-Mendelian theory? Before the Mendelian theory. Okay, before the Mendelism. So Mendelian theory says that principle of inheritance. That is the transmission of the character from the parents to offspring. So that's done by the factors. So finally we termed as DNA or gene, which is responsible for the transmission of the characters from one generation to another generation. So before the Mendel's theory, there are certain hypotheses are prevalent among the society, and it made the people to believe that concept also. So one of that theory is an inheritance of blending. So what this theory says? Inheritance of blending. So the characters are fused. Okay, the characters are fused or got mixed up. Parents' character are got mixed up to form the offspring. That was, so we call it the blending, inheritance of blending. The parents' characters got mixed up or got blended and expressed to form offspring. Okay, or it is expressed in the offspring. That is an inheritance of blending theory. Okay, and another one is in spontaneous life formation. This theory explains that this life is formed from the non-living things. Okay, followed by him Aristotle. He has proposed the theory called reproductive blood theory. What is the reproductive? According to him, he believed that the pure reproductive blood, that is in blood of male, that is in semen. The pure reproductive blood of male, that is semen, fused with the impure reproductive blood of female, menstrual flow, to form offspring, to make offspring. Though that is the way that offspring is formed. So thereby from the parents the characters are transmitted like that. Their hypotheses are exposing us to their point of view. Okay, fine. So next one, that fluid theory. According to the fluid theory, what did he explain? The fluid collected from the different parts of the human body got fused to form offspring. The fluid தான் the offspring உருவாக்குதுன்னா. Okay, so this is we call it a fluid theory. So later on, what happens? Leeuwenhoek is the first person able to find that the sperm under the microscope. Okay, what he says, the sperm already contains the tiny human beings at its head. Okay, the sperm contains tiny human beings, homunculus, we call it an homunculus, the tiny human being already present in the sperm. It only needs the stimulations to fertile, to involve in the fertilization process to form offspring. So according to him, this sperm already having the tiny human beings at its head, and it you need only to get stimulated to form offspring. Malviji also supported this pre-formation theory. Malviji also supported this pre-formation theory, and he also told this the tiny human beings are present at the embryo also, already present at the embryo, and it needed stimulations to form offspring. Okay, then followed by him Darwin's contionous theory. So according to him, he believed that the tiny hereditary particles, that's called gemmules, okay, are able to get fused to form offspring. Okay, so all this theory are disproved later on by the different scientists. So one of this is Shield and Swan cell theory disproved the spontaneous life formation. The spontaneous life formation. Okay, followed by him, so many scientists they disproved. This is the formation theory also disproved by the scientists. So all these things, all these theories are pre-Mendelian theory. So Mendelian theory gives the idea about what is genetics, how the characters are transmitted from the parents to offsprings. Okay, thank you for watching my channel, and in the next session we will be discussing about the Mendelian theory, which will give the elaborate understanding in the genetic.